Hey, it's SB McWilliams here, making another one of my incredibly amateur videos. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my refinishing products, maybe a little bit of history, just to educate some of you guys about it. A lot of you may have never heard of alkanet. Alkanet root was used for literally since the Egyptian times as a pigment. This is actually some shredded alkanet root, just to kind of show you what it looks like. Alkanet root is simply an herbal root. I get my herbal root, alkanet, from Pakistan. It also grows in other countries as well. It grows in a variety of environments, and it also actually grows certainly in the northwest of the United States as well. And all this started for me was with 1885 W&C Scott that had a kind of a burgundy hue to it, and I was redoing the gun for my dad, and I started asking around about what it was finished with, and I was told by a guy in Scotland it was actually alkanet, and I didn't have any available. No one really sells it. Purdy's, I think, sells some really small bottles of it, but most of my customers, I've never tried it. Most of my customers say it's inferior to mine, but I don't want to begrudge some other competitor that I haven't used. But that's feedback from many of the pros that use my stuff. Anyway, alkanet being used as pigment, it was used in painting, makeup, dye, for clothing, for centuries. So it was natural that the London gun makers would use an alkanet pigment if they were looking for a pigment for a specific reason. And I'll show you my walnut stain in a minute, but it's the same kind of mentality. Alkanet in its pure form, I start with this and I end up with this color. This is what I call raw alkanet. It has a brilliant red hue to it, as you can see. And then I do some blending to make it flow better, to make it tack up appropriately. In addition, you got to remember when you're doing guns like this old Moroku that I have, that I did it, one with alkanet and two my gloss varnish. When you do a gun, you're doing it on multiple axes, so the gun is actually being held this way and that way and this way as you're applying it. It's not like you're doing your grandmother's table. So that introduces some issues that are of concern with regard to how it's going to flow. It needs to flow nicely and self-level, but if it's too thin, it'll run. If it's too thick, it impacts the work time. You want it to tack up quickly, or relatively quickly, so that you can put on the next coat. Not necessarily even harden, but it's physically dry when you feel it. Any linseed-based product will take time to harden. A lot of people think that linseed oil actually evaporates and dries, and that's not the case at all. It actually polymerizes, so it's actually exchanging oxygen molecules over time to have it set up. So those factors of application are really important to guns. This gun was done with my gloss, and I didn't do anything with it. It hasn't been rubbed out. The way my gloss works, it simply, the way you apply it, it dries the way it looks wet. In fact, I scuff it with a Scott's pad, Scotch-Brite pad, a gray one, which is for varnishes, in between coats, because it's so glossy when dry that it's challenging to see where your bead is that you're running for your next coat. But you want to level it anyway in between coats, because as you can imagine, as you apply this, in general, you might have some aberrations in the surface, that cause the reflection to not be as true. In other words, when that light hits that wood, as it bounces off that wood, it gets refracted if the surface isn't true. The truer the surface, or the more uniform the coat that you have on there, that light is allowed to penetrate just like a glass lens and then reflect back directly to the eye so that it doesn't refract. And that's how come I can get such an incredible gloss, because of because of the blends that I've come up with, and two, that you want to do that in between varnish coat to effectively level the surface of it. But I'll probably have some more videos because I can go on forever. So this is the Alkanet shreds or shavings. You can buy it in a true root form. You can buy it in shavings, and you can always buy it in powder as well. This is the raw Alkanet color before I blend any oils or varnishes with it. This is actually a new product I have, Alkanet varnish. And I'll explain that in a second regarding the difference between Alkanet varnish and my Alkanet refinishing oil. But this, as you can see, looks exactly pretty much as the pure Alkanet. And the reason for that is because my gloss is so clear, its base gloss, the transparency of it is clear. Like if you look at linseed oil, you'll see linseed oil is quite yellow, but my varnish is a very high quality varnish, and actually quite expensive. But with that, you get tremendous clarity, which can allow you to have that kind of gloss on it. Now, my customers typically buy my Alkanet refinishing oil, which is a linseed base, and then I have a number of ingredients to do exactly what we just discussed as far as flow, tack time, improving the gloss of it. It gives kind of a satin gloss to it, and then tack time as well, because with anything with linseed oil, tack time is critical. Most of the guys that use my stuff, just like the London gun makers, they like to get about 1 coat per day with my product. If you get up early in the morning and do a coat, when it's time to go to bed and do a coat, you can usually get a secondary coat in. And then I have a new product which is 1800. I call it 1800's walnut stain, and I make this actually from the husk of the walnut. That's the green shroud that encases the actual walnut itself. And this product is very similar to Alkanet from the standpoint that it's historical. It was also used as a pigment and a colorant for clothing, and this is actually quite time consuming for me to make, even though it's the least expensive product I sell. Everything I sell has its roots in history. The walnut, even my varnish, goes back to the turn of the century as far as its formula goes, and of course Alkanet goes back thousands of years, and I like that because I'm a bit of a purist. When you use Alkanet, the reason you want to, and the reason the London gun makers use it as well, this wood, every piece of wood reacts a little bit differently to Alkanet, because the inherent colors within the wood, the porosity in the wood, all can affect Alkanet's impact on it. Like I've done, I've done a pre-64 Winchester. It turned a brilliant mahogany. This little scrap piece I have here, you can kind of see the hue. This just has 2 coats of my satin on it, and my satin ends up, it actually get a little bit more glossier than that, but a lot of guys buy my Alkanet oil and then buy my gloss or satin varnish to put over it, which is the reason why I came up with my Alkanet varnish. It's kind of a one-step. The color is you really can't tell the difference between the two, but it has the weather resistance that you like, and also if you want gloss, it has the gloss that you like. And if you like a nice sheen, my satin will give you a nice sheen. Or you can have a hand rub. I have a hand rub Alkanet refinishing oil, which this would be, you can use as a final finish as well. And then I have a hand rub non-Alkanet product as well. So I don't just sell Alkanet products, I also have traditional clear varnishes and also clear hand rub. But in this piece of wood, one, I want to show you the potential of the gloss, but in general, most Alkanet's guns will present more of a burgundy or mahogany kind of hue. It changes a little bit depending on the light that you're in. Quite frankly, sunlight will take on some little bit different characteristics. Under this incandescent light, it's a little bit different. Under fluorescent lights, it's a little bit different. But what's nice about Alkanet is when you apply it, it picks up some characteristics that the eye wouldn't necessarily see prior to you putting it on. And also it populates some porosity that you didn't even know was there. For instance, when this Moroku was started, this was a whole very blonde section of wood, but it has mixed porosity, and if you get in close, you can actually see the dots of, and that's effectively porosity. Okay, so it's a pore. And as you wipe it with Alkanet, it'll populate those open pores with color that might not even be there, or it may be there in a subtler way, and the Alkanet will bring it out very clearly. Quality walnut, like crotch feather, a lot of guys might not know this who are used to dealing with straight grain guns that we so often see today that just are, you know, with all due respect to them, it's just a low grade of walnut. They'll pick up the hue, but there's only so much you can do with it. The stain will create a deeper contrast between, like you can see in this lighter grain versus that. But when you have a more complex piece of wood, you'll see actually, especially in crotch feather, you'll see some little shards of purple, yellows, reds. I know that's hard to believe if you've never seen it, but if you look closely, you will. And Alkanet, because of the color itself, actually, in addition to adding a specific hue, it will highlight those areas a little bit more as well. So when you have, and this is why, you know, a number of the pros that use mine, whether they're checkers or stock makers or fine gun makers, quite frankly, they use my product because it takes a great piece of wood and makes it really an amazing piece of wood. And there's been many guns I've done where I've run in and shown my wife how amazing it looks, because I myself don't know what's going to happen when I start applying this product. And that's why the old London gun makers use it as well, because it simply enhances what they're working with already and helps make their product as nice as it can be. So I'm going to set this guy aside just for a second, and I just want to show you just briefly. This wood is really, really red. This is just a scrap piece of wood that I had laying around, but I wanted to show you kind of how using my varnish works. But it sounds crazy, but I use these blue Scots towels, and for application, I learned this on a fine woodworking site. They don't create lint. I usually cut like a 3 or 4 inch square, fold it down like you see here, trim the edges, and then I'll crimp that fine edge right there until it has a fairly sharp tip to it. And forgive me because I'm one-handed, so it's a little bit harder for me to demonstrate this. But I use this for all my products. Works great. Highly recommend it. It's always in my instructions. With my finishes, typically you'll just get a dot. Usually what I do, I'm going to save half this, is I'll load it up pretty good and I'll do something along those lines. And then all you have to simply do is drag it. I'm not going to do this whole piece, and I know I loaded it up a bit. Let me just spread it out a little bit. And I'm basically trying to show you how ridiculously easy this stuff is to apply. It's not like True Oil that I used for years, and I thought it was the best stuff out there. The problem is when you get a revelation of what really is the best stuff or higher quality material, you're like, I'm never going to use that other stuff again. And the way, see how easy that was to apply? I mean, there it is. And what's nice about my varnishes is they dry the way you see them. This is my Alkanite varnish. I believe this is my gloss. I didn't mark this. Yeah, it's my gloss. I got the same label on both of them, but on the side I'll write whether it's satin or Alkanite, or I'm sorry, satin or gloss. So that's the beauty of that, is that there it is. You have plenty of work time to do it. It doesn't leave any witness marks. Literally, it'll start tacking up here very soon. But while I'm talking to you right now, you still have the ability. There's no race like there can be with True Oil, where you're. Sorry, I'm kind of going crazy with the amount. Let's just do this whole thing since I've loaded up. So you would just wait for this to set up. This tacks up. This tacks up really quite quickly. You can easily do 2 coats a day with my varnish. And normally what I do is when I apply my varnish from the beginning, I don't typically scuff between like 1 coat. I usually go like 2 or 3 coats. I'll let it set up for a day and then I'll scuff it, making sure that it's completely hard. And I did want to show you my new walnut stain. What motivated me to do this, create the walnut stain, was I was working on a pre-64. I was working on a 1903 Winchester lever gun, and on some of the Winchester forums I read that even though it was never clearly revealed, that Winchester used walnut made from walnut husk as their stain. And on certain guns, like this gun in particular that I was doing, I believe it was made out of beech, and beech can be very light, and there's other light woods that are used on cheaper guns. And to get a uniform color, they would simply use a walnut stain. So I started playing with it, and to get the right look of it, and this is kind of what I came up with. The nice thing about it is this is a relatively dark piece of wood already. But on light wood, I'm sorry, I'm using a scrap piece of wood. On light wood, the color is quite dramatic in what you get from it. Hold on, because now I'm talking, so I've got to show it to you. No, I'm not a professional video maker, and I figure if you want the information, you won't care either. But obviously, treated wood's not going to work, so I'll save that for another demonstration. But that's my new walnut. The thing that I wanted to do was I really wanted to create a stain that would replicate the Winchester Model 94 walnut, and I wanted it to be pure, in line with what I've done with Alkanite as well. So I hope that enlightens you guys a little bit about Alkanite. I ad-lib all this stuff, so if I say or stuff a lot, it's because I'm scrambling for words. But all my customers know they can write to me at any time. I'm on sbmcwilliams.com, and all my products are on eBay. And whether you use my products or not, if you have some questions, please send me a note. I'm happy to answer anything that I can. All right, SB McWilliams. God bless.